New Zealand's greenhouse gas inventory states our country's agricultural sector accounts for 50% of our emissions, but the data does not currently account for the natural cycles reabsorbing carbon, methane and nitrous oxide from these emissions, nor the steps farmers are taking towards a more sustainable industry.
And future-proofing is not continuing to do what we do. It's actually evolving as you go in reaction to what your customers are thinking, what the climate's doing, your social licence to farm. So all of that fits into the mix.
South Wairarapa dairy farmer Aidan Bicken wants to spread the word about livestock farming becoming more sustainable and how it compares to other forms of protein production, like soy plantations.
When you think that the carbon footprint of cow's milk versus soy milk is not necessarily too far apart, but do the people drinking soy milk and eating tofu think about the Amazon rainforest that's been chopped down? And do they think about that almost all soy is Roundup ready, so it's been genetically engineered to be sprayed with Roundup prior to harvest. So I think there's a need for a bit more of a conversation in that space around that technology.
Located in Tauhara-Nico, sustainable farming at Kaiwaiwai Dairies means integrating systems that marry business objectives with more sustainable outcomes.
It might be looking at reducing impact of winter grazing on our soils. It could be about looking at the feed type that will help reduce methane into the future. It may be using direct drilling or low tillage techniques to reduce nitrous oxide emissions as part of our pasture regeneration.
Kaiwaiwai have been analysing their emissions paid into the New Zealand Emissions Trading Scheme, or ETS, calculating diesel usage and how to minimise it, as well as introducing 52 kilowatt solar panels to help shift away from fossil fuels. Wetland areas are just one initiative used by farmers to filter nitrates away from waterways.
Nitrogen fertiliser, we've managed to limit the use of that by more efficient use of our effluent, because you're actually recycling some of the stuff that potentially could have left the farm. Drain and divert it into here for this experiment, so we know the volume of water and everything for a science. We've invested heavily in effluent storage and also technology to spread it through our irrigators, which have controlled nozzles. So you can spread the nitrogen which is in the effluent, which reduces the need for so much brought in. Also the irrigator, I think, has actually helped us grow more grass on farm, closer to the shed, and enable us to reuse the fertiliser in the effluent. So it's a whole range of things, and all those things done properly will help your profitability and lower your emissions, which I believe the markets are starting to reward.
Just up the road, Stu Weatherston from Rotapai Farms also wants the industry to be seen in a more positive light.
I think 10 years ago you struggled to hold your head up walking down the street a bit, you know. I think it was you didn't want to wear a Fonterra badge on your shirt, which is sad, right? It's a big company, it's a good company, but that's definitely changed in the last 4 or 5 years, and I think in the pandemics, the COVID's changed that again. Yeah, you know, the term dirty dairying is probably, that's gone now, you know, I reckon. Like, I feel like we're achieving something, but we need to keep telling that story, eh? Out of how many dairy farms there in New Zealand, like, I don't know, 10,000, 12,000, whatever, we're all spending money and we're all doing the right thing, you know? And yeah, and it needs to, the story's going to get told better, I think.
Weatherston says Kiwis need to understand that farming is about so much more than generating profits for their own pockets.
You're producing good protein for quality food, like and we take pride in what we produce, you know. And we export, 95% of it. We're the country's biggest earner, really. And I guess they see the price in the fridge, don't they? There is a middleman as well. You know, it's world market set, not New Zealand set. And it doesn't come free because it comes with a cost, and we're the ones fronting the cost to get the milk there. For us, I think the more people can come on farm and appreciate what we do, the better. and see what we're doing, see where their 2 litre of milk or their yogurt or their whatever comes from, and how it's produced. Who we provide money to produce it.
Like cropping or cattle farming, dairy farmers support a network of local suppliers. Rotopais include milking shed suppliers, electricians, tractor and pump operators, as well as barley for feed from 9 local growers.
You know what I mean? Like, we spend probably 60 to 70% of our income into the local community, you know, and every dairy farmer does, right? So there's a whole range of services and people that are affected if the dairy farms aren't running properly.
Increasing regulations imposed on the industry is making life tough for these farmers economically. They believe policymakers need a better understanding of farm systems before implementing blanket regulations across the country.
If you give me good policy, I'll be very innovative about meeting that policy. If you give me bad regulation and policy, that's just a bit of a hiding to nothing in there. And I think what we've seen, regulation coming out, which is one size fits all. So the things like the winter grazing regulations, the irrigation, increase in irrigation area, requirements to get a resource consent to increase your milking platform are probably actually quite pointless up here in there. Whereas in other regions and other catchments, I think that's there. So I get quite frustrated with national level regulation to fix something that's a problem in some areas.
Pollution is increasingly seen as a negative externality, making it the responsibility of the business that profits in its production. Council and the government traditionally pay for remediation from dairy pollution, but increasingly, compliance costs are falling onto the farmers who produce the pollution. Upgrading old effluent systems to sealed ponds, renovating milking sheds, irrigation, and installing fencing to reduce the business polluting waterways for others collectively cost Rotopai farms approximately $700,000.
We're a private enterprise, you know, and we're not looking for a handout. You know, we make our own money, but at some point they've got to go, well, we're making these guys uneconomic. They're spending a lot of money because we're making, with the regulations saying they have to. Have we gone too far? When our payout drops by, you know, say it's $9 and it drops to $6.50, the costs are still there. They don't drop, you know, by 30%.
Regional councils do subsidise farmers with riparian planting, which helps improve freshwater quality, but there's still around a third of costs for the farmers to pay.
The roadblocks that get in the way of sustainable farming are mostly up here in the farmer's head. We think that we can't do something, or we don't really want to change because it's hard or requires a change in systems. But physically, it's actually easier, I think. You're not shifting brakes all the time in the winter, slogging through mud. You've got time to go to kids' sport. All that stuff's pretty bloody important to me.
In Martinborough, Glen Eden Farm functions regeneratively, meaning biodiversity and pasture health is a priority, above and below the soil. Guscott defines sustainable farming as being able to do the same thing year after year without having a negative impact.
So our measures for sustainable farming on Glen Eden relate mostly around soil protection. So we've been fencing waterways for 4 or 5 years now. We've had QE2 bush protected for probably 15, 18 years maybe. And that's bush that my great-grandfather didn't mill, because that was the thing they all did back in the day. We do lots of direct drilling. We don't intensively winter any cattle, haven't done that for a few years.
Guscott thinks that focusing on greenhouse gas data from farming without accounting for naturally occurring carbon sequestration and nitrogen cycles neglects the real issue of fossil fuels.
It's a little bit unfair in that the warming impact that animals have is relatively negligible compared to what fossil fuels is like. The methane that comes from animals is, yes, it's more potent, but it just cycles in and out the whole time. So provided we're not increasing our animals, there's not actually any increase in or change in what there was 50 years ago. And there's a lot less animals than there was 50 years ago around the place. So to my mind, it's probably fudging the real issue, which is fossil fuels.
According to a study in the 2021 British Medical Journal on Nutrition, Prevention and Health, meat-dependent diets contribute up to 3 times as many carbon emissions compared to plant-based diets. But Guscott is not concerned.
People who stop eating meat for environmental reasons is entirely their own decision. I'm not worried about that at all. I know that worldwide meat consumption is increasing by 2 to 3% a year. So if they don't want to eat meat for whatever reason, that's fine. We grow pumpkins, we grow sweet corn on our farm, so I'm happy to cater to them as well.
Other research says the amount of land required to produce meat is significantly greater than soy-based proteins, making it ultimately unsustainable. In the Wairarapa, these farmers are working locally, but they say to effect real change, widespread action far beyond their industry and their country is needed.
We think we're a member of the global community, so we've got to think globally. We're a member of the New Zealand community, so we've got to think about what's good for New Zealand. So export incomes are quite important for New Zealand's lifestyle and welfare. We think locally in terms of our community and our industry, and then we think that we're a dairy farmer on Kaiwaiwai. And so we just fit into that whole bundle. And so climate change is a global problem that everyone should be concerned about. And I think as we are concerned about it, farmers are concerned about it. And some of that concern is about the impact of the weather, changing weather patterns, is what will farming look like in this region in 10 or 15 or 50 years' time? Where will they be growing avocados? Will it be in Southland? So farmers are thinking about that in there and are much more invested in the conversation on a day-to-day basis, whereas in town your sewage just disappears down a pipe, hopefully, which hopefully doesn't leak, but it's still sewage. You're driving your car, you're running your house, you're doing all the other things. There's greenhouse gas emissions around that, but it's quite easy to feel separated from that because you just pay in your fuel price, your diesel, petrol, a bit of contribution to the ETS. And then for us, that stuff's actually a lot more real because we live it.
These farmers are optimistic that with time, their efforts will lead on to greener pastures. Eli Franco, Local Focus.